So, welcome to the Keynote Plenary of the second annual Transgender Leadership Summit. My name is Riku Matsuda, and it's an incredible, incredible honor to be asked as a community journalist. I have a show on KPFK every other Thursday morning at 7 a.m. Where it's sort of become like a trans show because I am trans and everything I talk about has something to do with social justice. And so like as a trans person that works on social justice issues, it becomes sort of like your main identity, right? So when people talk about your show, they're like, you know, that trans show? It's interesting. So that's why I'm up here today. I've been asked to sort of moderate this panel as a community journalist and someone who often talks to, I have no idea who I'm talking to actually. So this is a freaky experience for me that I can see all y'all in the face because normally I'm just like reading to people. I'm sorry, I'm totally gonna slow down. See, English language supremacy, Riku. Should have done some breathing with Catriona first, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so I'll move on to our wonderful and amazing panelists, and Jamison Green to my immediate left reminded me how lucky I am to be facilitating this panel, and he's absolutely right. I was like throwing up all the way coming over here because I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous, oh my God, I'm so nervous. These amazing people, some of whom I've had the privilege of meeting before, but specifically Sylvia Guerrero, who's on the panel today. I'm like shaking because I had never been this close before and always wanted to be, no doubt. And so thank you for being here today. No, it's for real though. Wait. Let me just give you a hug. Okay. Oh my God, now I'm better. No, for real though. So the way we're going to go about this plenary is like a lot of times at conferences, we're real traditional and we do things like, you know, us and them, leaders and non-leaders and stuff like that. And I mean, this whole point of being a part of this leadership conference is that I heard it echoed in every single session I've been in that all of us are leaders. And that structure of thinking about leaders and followers is really ill to me. Like, I don't get it. And I resist it in my work all the time. And so I've been really happy to hear people who are folks that I totally have all this mad respect for talk about how it's about like replacing themselves, how it's about bringing other people along with us. Not like we're leading them and then they're back here, but like that geese analogy that Catriona and Mason broke down the other day, I hope comes up again. I love analogies. So I'm going to move on and let folks know that each of the panelists are going to speak about their experiences organizing and doing advocacy work and talking to trans folks, non-trans folks about our communities, about transgender rights and transgender lives. So these are 5 folks that are a part of it, as all of us are. So we want to make this plenary as interactive as possible. That's why I've got the mic off the stand. And so I can't think of a good talk show host model, so I'm just gonna Riku it. You know, I was gonna say Oprah, I was like, all those people are not right for me. So I'm gonna be afterwards, you know, with this red mic in the audience with y'all to make sure that this is truly interactive. So please don't feel that you are Phil Donahue. Oh, see, now that's like, that really, my racial identity is totally like tripping. Well, okay, maybe if Phil Donahue married a Japanese woman and then had a kid, like I'd be like, okay, let's not talk about that. That's not what it's about. So the order that we're going to go in today is first Mike, Michelle, Dennis, and then I'll give everyone's bios. I'm sure you've read it already and or already know these folks, but I'm going to introduce them. They're going to talk. The next person I'll introduce and so forth. And then so please keep in mind things that folks are saying that you want to respond to, questions you want to ask, comments you want to make. So when we open it up, it's not just about like comments and questions, talk to each other as well, right? Okay. So our first panelist this morning is Mike Michelle Dennis, who is a transgender queer gender rights advocate and presents as both Mike and Michelle in almost all areas of his and her life. Is West Hollywood Transgender Task Michelle Mike Dennis is also losing my place, need my glasses. The West Hollywood Transgender Task Force co-chair and member of the Gender PAC National Advisory Board, the League of Trans Unified Sisters, holla, Lotus, and the GenderQueer Revolution board. Give it up, GQR. And, you know, Mike Michelle Dennis is also a really amazing and wonderful person and sweet as like, whoa, and a million other things and super smart. So do it.
Wow. Now you're hot. Wow. Is this on? Okay. With that kind of a lead-in, I'm in big trouble. Listen, this morning I want to share with you a possible different way of being in the world. Now, what does that mean? Okay. All of us have struggled, and we're survivors. We really are. We've struggled to come to grips with who we are, to come to acceptance, to come to a place of pride, to a place of magnificence about who we are. And I just want to, this is a paid political announcement, I want the Lotus women with the tranny rock star t-shirts to stand up. Woo! Okay. This notion, tranny rock star, captures what we've been about, our struggle and who we are to be magnificent in ourselves. And I want to acknowledge that and affirm that. But I also want you to try and consider to take on a different concept for a few minutes. It's like putting a jacket on, seeing how it feels, how it looks. I want you to consider that as important as our notion of ourselves as transgender people is, that perhaps being transgendered is just a characteristic. No different than our height, our weight, color of our hair. Mine changes all the time. Color of our eyes. Who we really are is who we are. Okay? And when I share with people in the world about who I am, I talk about my passion. I talk about what excites me, my compassion. What really grabs me as a human being and what I stand for in the world. And what I've discovered is that people are hungry for this kind of conversation. And when that happens, something magical occurs. Our differences and our characteristics temporarily recede in the background, and we become two really luminous, magnificent human beings connecting with each other. And when that happens, there's a window of opportunity that opens up to talk about our differences, our characteristics. And our characteristic as being transgendered is something unique and something people are very curious about. The notion, the concept has been introduced and is flooding the airways. I just saw in the LA Times this morning an article about the city manager of Largo, Florida. And this, you've all heard about this. This person has come out being transsexual and has been fired by the commissioners of the people who run the city. We're here. 8% of humanity, the best empirical data indicates, are transgendered. You got that? 8%. And what we have as the unique characteristic is something our society needs. We're bringing something to the table that is so precious, so powerful, so incredible that that's what they need to hear. So let me tell you very briefly a personal experience. Last January, I started to attend my church, which is Brentwood Presbyterian. This is like an upscale, rich Presbyterian church. As Michelle, I talked to the pastors beforehand. They were all fine, supportive, and people were very polite. But I'd often be the only person in my pew. And that went on for many months. And I was a member of a small group at my church, and we connected on a human level. You know, our pains, our crying together, our triumphs. And then one day, the opportunity came up to share in front of the congregation what it was like being part of a small group. And I told my small group leaders, I'm going to do this as Michelle. And get this, it was hilarious. In the bulletin, it said Mike Dennis. And I get up there as Michelle. And my entire small group stood up behind me in support. And I said, in the next 3 minutes, I want to share with you what it's like to be part of a small group and to be a transgendered person. And in 3 minutes, I just changed how they heard me, knew me, understood me, experienced me. And afterwards, people flooded over to congratulate me. And you know, I knew that I was home once and for all. When the next week, and I went back to get my name tag out of the slot and put it on, and I didn't ask them, they just did it on their own. They changed it to Mike Michelle Dennis. And that's how I'm listed. That's the kind of impact that all of us can have. And I know that many of you are having that amazing impact on the world. That's the impact that we can have. That's the way to I think, for me, to step out into extraordinary power and say to yourself, yeah, I'm transgendered and I'm proud of it. I'm a really magnificent person, that characteristic, but it's just a characteristic. You know, not everybody can be transgender, and I am one. Wow, that's fabulous. But yes, but I'm connecting right now with you on a heartfelt level, on what's my passion in life, who I stand for, what I'm willing to die for. And oh yes, by the way, I'm transgendered. That kind of connection is extraordinarily powerful. And people will be drawn into your sphere like a magnet, being that way in the world. So that's why I wanted to share this morning, and thank you very much.
Give it up, Mike Michelle, the magical Mike Michelle. For sure. I love it. Not everyone can be transgender, and that's fabulous. Ha-ha, 92% of you. Okay? That is cool. Empirical data as well. Means it's valid and proven. Is that what that means? Okay. Our next panelist, Jamison Green, again. I was like all on the conference call, and then Jameson was like super nice to me, you know? It was like, I love you. No, for real, I remember, let me just share this really quick. With this one time in New York, I can't remember what it was, some trans thing. And I was like walking behind you, and I was like, oh my God, that's Jamison Green. Oh my God, what is he talking about? And I was like so nervous. I was like walking 10 paces behind. That's like my cultural upbringing, you know? Ooh, don't tell my mom!
Oh, man.
But anyway, so I was like, oh, wow, look, Jameson, wow. I was like, ah. And so when we got on the call, I was just like, wow. I mean, that was my own fear, you know? That was my own fear, so I'm over it.
Good.
Provocateur. I gotta practice. Provocateur. Okay.
Yeah.
Jamison Green has been a legislative provocateur, advocating for transgender health, safety, and civil rights since 1991. Anybody born before, or like, anyone 1991, birth of 19, no? Oh, they exist, you know what I'm saying? Trans people. Yesterday, if the youth were here, right, they were like born in like 98. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. Jameson is the author of Becoming a Visible Man and serves on the boards of the Transgender Law and Policy Institute, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, and the Human Rights Campaign Business Council. What? That's a good thing. That little what was like, that was...
Okay. Thank you, Riku.
It's like so, totally Southern California. I'm really sorry. Regionalism.
I love it. I love it. We be cool.
Okay. I think I get it.
I wanted to talk a little bit about some past stuff and how I see we've progressed in talking about ourselves and telling our stories outside of this community, but you know, to the larger world. It used to be that the only place you could go, the only place we could actually appear was on talk shows or in human sexuality classes as guest speakers. And I actually started speaking before 1991. I actually came into trans conscious space in 87, and I actually started my transition in 88. And right away, my two mentors, who were Lou Sullivan and Steve Dane, said to me, "You look really good. You're going to be a good spokesman. Would you take over the classes that we've been speaking in for all these years, because we don't have time to do this anymore?" And it was all about looking good. It was all about that kind of, it's because the whole paradigm at that time was about passing and being normal and not being trans. And I had a fundamental reaction to this that, I can't help the way I look. I mean, I look the same, really, except for the beard and the loss of hair. I look the same as I looked before. I don't look that different, really. I was very androgynous before. I was extremely genderqueer, except that we didn't have that term. And I could not pass as anything prior to my transition. So I'm privileged in that sense, but people make assumptions about me because of the way I look. They made assumptions about me because of the way I looked before. They assumed that I was a truck driver before. Now they assume that I'm a professor. Okay? So whatever. The point is that I learned early on that people make assumptions based on the way you look. And one of my major messages continually has been that we don't all get to choose the way we look. I didn't choose the way I look, and people express their gender in a lot of different ways. And we all have the right to do that, regardless of how we look. And if somebody's appearance, which may be a gendered appearance, makes you non-trans people, I'm not talking to you, but you, the audience that we sometimes speak to outside of our community, if that makes you uncomfortable, that's your problem, not our problem. But I've used my appearance to make that point, because I can get in under the radar. And I've used that. And it's not that it's, I'm not like trying to be super proud of that in a sort of gloating way, in any way, shape, or form. But when I first started doing speaking, I would sometimes sit in the room, in the audience, in the middle. And sometimes if I hadn't met the instructor before, and this was in college classrooms generally, because that was pretty much the only place that anybody cared about what we had to say or that we existed, I would sit there, and if I hadn't met the instructor before, they would say, "Is our guest speaker here? We were supposed to have a guest speaker today." And then I would stand up. I would wait a couple seconds, let them get nervous. And then and then I would stand up, and people would literally shrink away from me. "Oh my God, I was sitting next to it," they'd say as I walked by. I mean, it was just appalling how people, the presumptions that people had and how validated they felt in expressing them verbally. They were totally right on and safe to call me it. And they would literally say, right to my face, "Well, you're a freak. You're a freak." Didn't matter how good I looked. As soon as they knew that I was trans, I was a freak. So as the years went by of doing this, and I was originally, you would either speak in an abnormal psychology class or a human sexuality class. And I would start off in a human sexuality class by saying, this isn't about sexuality. I'm not going to talk to you about sexuality. Maybe if I get to trust you as I'm speaking to you, and feel that your questions are worth, are respectful, I will tell you about my sexuality, but that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm here to talk to you about my gender and your gender. The most important thing that I've learned in speaking about connecting with an audience is to make sure I understand who they are, why they're in the room. They're in classrooms, there's a lot of people who don't want to be there. They don't want to hear our stories. They're being forced to sit there to get a grade. And if you can connect with those people and get them to realize that you're a human being and to care about you as a human being and to broaden the issues to talk about people who don't have the experience that you have of being able to be in a classroom, but who are living on the street as trans, trying to eke out their living, trying to have their self-esteem, trying to recover from the abuse in their lives, whatever has occurred. If you can make them realize that they have a personal connection to those people as well, not just me in front of them, then you're moving them to think of something bigger. And they get beyond just the topic of human sexuality, and you can actually change someone's life right in a minute. Someone who never cared about this. And that's the power of getting out and speaking to non-trans groups. In the abnormal psych classes, I would say, it really makes me angry that I'm in here speaking to an abnormal psychology class, because what I'm going to talk about is not abnormal at all. And over the years, now I speak in classes about medical ethics. I speak in classes about psychology that's not abnormal. I speak in classes that are for nurses. I speak in classes for doctors. I speak in classes for attorneys. I speak at professional meetings. I speak in corporate boardrooms. Wherever I can, as well as at Pride festivals and all kinds of any place that I can, actually, to talk about humanity, really, to talk about humanity. I mean, my experience is really, in many ways, privileged. What I've been privileged in, apart from my white skin and my education, which is a privilege because I was an adopted kid. I just got lucky. What I've been privileged in is to be part of this community. Because since my transition, prior to my transition, I was a pretty, held in person, as many of us are. We hold ourselves back. And we hold ourselves in because we're afraid of expressing ourselves. We're afraid of what's going to happen to us when we do express ourselves. We're afraid of people knowing the truth about us because the truth has always been represented to be so horrifying. And once I faced that and got over that and started to carry that message out, my privilege has been to meet all of you. And I carry that with me out into the world. I have met the most amazing people. I have traveled. I've been privileged to travel to many foreign countries to speak on these issues. When I've been to these countries, my presence there has brought other people in those cultures out and had them be willing to come forward and announce themselves publicly. I had one of the most amazing experiences in Taiwan when a very, very famous, their leading composer of opera, very important in their culture, their leading composer of opera was an FTM. They didn't know it. He was in the closet. And he took advantage of my presence in the country to make a public, announcement of who he was in a press conference with me. It was in every paper in that country. And he was angry at how he'd been treated as a child. And but it was my being there that gave him the courage to come out. And he almost backed out at the last minute, just before the conference. He almost, I had to talk for an hour before he showed up because he was so scared. And then he realized he might never have an opportunity like that again. And so he came out. We spent the rest of the day together. It was amazing. This is an amazing guy. Young guy. Their leading composer of opera. Really famous. He was really good looking, I'll tell you. Another important element to use, connect with your audience, know who they are, know why they're in the room. Don't talk only about yourself. Tell stories about other people. I just had you guys, it was silent in here for a second when I was talking about Tim was his name. When I was talking about Tim, you were all waiting. Talk about other people besides yourselves. And use humor, because that humanizes you and makes people connect and feel with you. And that's the key. Get them to feel.
You feel that? So how many people are like, okay, where can I go speak to some group and talk about other people? No, I'm serious. Like, how many folks now feel like, motivated, you want to go talk to folks and stuff like that? So there are people in the room who coordinate that type of thing, right? Anyone coordinate like speakers bureaus and stuff like that? Ruby, stand up. Let me give props really quick. This is Ruby. He's a student here at USC, and he's like one of few out trans students here. And so like he's been incredibly involved in the organizing and the planning and other events going on in campus. So just for real, like give props. So talk to Ruby. You want to come to USC? Some other folks. So please connect with Daniel. Please connect with folks, especially if you're local, and if you're not local, regionalize yourself and is that a word? Connect with other people who are doing this work. And I'm sure if you have access to a computer, you look online for that sort of thing. There is plenty of calls. When I go to a psych class or abnormal whatever, I say, "Hi, I'm an abnormal human." To use humor to just I'm like, when I was little, at my leg, no. Okay. For real. Thanks, Jameson. Okay, our next panelist is Sylvia Guerrero. Sylvia was born and raised in San Francisco's East Bay, where she was the eldest of a family of 14 children. She worked as a legal secretary for 16 years and is now the mother of 4 children. Following the murder of her child, Gwen, Sylvia committed herself to protecting families with LGBT children. She often speaks to local youth, community groups, and students about Gwen's experiences and the need for societal change and education regarding transgender equality. Welcome, Sylvia.
Hey, don't embarrass me. Is it on? I don't think it's on. Thank you. Sit down, you guys. Get embarrassed. Is the mic on? Yes. Hey, don't embarrass me. And they took my speech. So I don't even know where to go from there. I think one of the things that, can everyone hear? Can hear is, I think one of the key words that's been reiterated with the two panelists is connecting with people. I just keep it real, and I do share my daughter's tragic murder story with, when I go out and speak at schools or with people. And I'm just reiterating what they've said, is just to keep it on a human level, and you have to feel your room or the people that you're speaking with, because it's different every time. And being able to connect and captivate their attention, I think allows their minds to be more open. And I know for me at least, it's paid off. Every single speech that I have given, I've gotten positive feedback. Even people that were homophobic prior to my speech or hearing me speak send me lovely little notes or an email telling me that they were homophobic prior to hearing my daughter's story or prior to me speaking at their school, and that's changed and that they will no longer be prejudiced towards, the LGBT community. So, I mean, that's awesome. And even if it just changes one person, in that school, to me it's worth it. But we all play, an intricate part in this movement and change. And the good thing is that change is happening, so it's so important what you're doing and what we're doing, but we need to work together as a team. We can move mountains, and I truly believe that. And I believe that God has blessed us with all of our gifts, and we should use them to the fullest. There's nothing we can lose. What happened to my daughter should have never happened. And you're all entitled to your lives and to reach your dreams and your goals. Don't ever let anyone stop you. Love yourself and be proud of yourself and hold your head high. That's what my daughter did. It's how I raised my children. And, you all deserve equality. And I'm really sorry for a lot of the suffering that you still are going through and what you've been through. It really breaks my heart to know. I didn't realize how bad it was until I lost Gwen. And now I know, and now I stand with you. And, and I love you, and I've met some amazing people too. You're my new family too, and I embrace you, and I'm there for you. We're in this all together. Shame on you guys taking a lot of my speech. I should have gone first. They've been doing this a lot longer, okay, so. But I just try to keep it real with the kids. I think, God bless me. I'm a people person, but I connect more with kids, with youth. And I believe they're our future. And if we can change them and teach them to be loving and accepting and respectful of one another and not be judgmental and not be bullies or, do the name calling, I believe that they can change this world. They're the future. And hopefully, when they're parents or grandparents like I am now, this world will be a better place and there won't be any more murders like what happened to my daughter. And they'll be able to be free like you're entitled to be. We all are. Thank you.
Yeah, I tell you in a minute. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for being here today, honestly. So, my commitment now is I'm going to go tell my mom right now and be like, Mom, Sylvia's all on the, speaker's track. You know what I mean? Grandma, let's go. No, for real. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm also very serious that my family has been supportive of me in many ways, and I've never asked them to go that step further and talk to even their friends or, outside of family. And I think for me that's always been scary. I don't want to put my mom in that position, but just to hear you talk about what an impact that has been for you. And that's important because
I'm not from the LGBT community. I'm not transgender or whatever. I'm just Gwen's mom. Hey, not too loud now. Sometimes I let people wonder, okay? But what does it matter even if I was, But I think that also really moves people, and especially with the teachers and the administrations of the schools, that's where it really connects. And so that's good. Like I said, God is working and moving mountains, so yay for us.
Yay for us. Let's move them together. Now, okay, talking about moving mountains, if anyone could do it with their mind. Dun, 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 dun. Our next speaker, I think for me, reminded me of the need to be spiritual. However, religious or not, just to be spiritual, to know that I have soul and that I have spirit, and that as trans people, we are truly magical. All people who love trans people, you know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Magical. Caitriona Reed is a teacher, group facilitator, and poet. She has led retreats and workshops in Buddhism, deep ecology, and social responsibility for more than 20 years. Since 1971, she has trained with Buddhist and Sufi teachers including Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. Along with her partner, Michelle Bensamin Miki, she is co-founder of Ordinary Dharma in Los Angeles and Manzanita Village Retreat Center in Warner Springs. If you've never been there, you've never seen the website, check it out, manzanitavillage.org. Not to be all like promotion, but it's not about promotion, it's about community. So, Caitriona Reed.
Good morning. Buenos dias. Salam alaikum. Shalom. I'm really honored to be here. I'm going to, if you'll allow me, see if I can speak from that place where I heal my fear, my shame, and begin by marking where we are, where we're seated today in the esteemed halls of USC, bastion of power, privilege, money, empire, and war. And to mark, to honor, as I often do when I speak, and sometimes people get it, sometimes they don't, because it's almost like a foreign language in the dominant culture, to honor our ancestors and the ancestors of this land. Tongla, Chumash, Kawia, Kupeño, people who honored transgendered healers to spirit, people who were moved from this land with blood and money, and that we stand on their shoulders, and that they are with us, and that we're not alone. I'd like to also honor not only Gwen and Ruby Rodriguez and Brandon and Tyra and all the other numberless, nameless others who've been destroyed by misunderstanding and fear, but also those great heroes and sheroes, our ancestors of spirit, of the Angolan trans warrior king, the Zinga, of Jeanne d'Arc, Saint Joan, a transgendered man who was beheaded by her opponents, by the English, not for fighting them, but for being a trans man. And again, for all the other nameless, and for the earth, whose spirit we embody, for the gods and goddesses that have been, from ageless times back, honored as Sibella, Atis, Mzinga, in all cultures of all times, that we have community, that we have ancestors, and that we're part of that, and that we're not alone. So, as a teacher, I do my best to reiterate, as a white person, goodness, to evoke some sense of continuity and context in this time of empire, this time of destruction. And then secondly, to remember that we get lost, all of us, in all the varieties of identity politics. Oppressed, we focus so easily on the particularities of our oppression of class, of race, of gender, and of transgender. And we forget that in solidarity there's strength, and that our oppression isn't singular. It's particular, but it's not singular. Any totalitarian regime abhors, detests, and is terrified of diversity of any kind. A uniformity, whether it's a uniformity of binary genders or a uniformity of cultural expression, is a threat to a status quo that is essentially destructive, greed-based, fear-based. And so we perhaps have in the past, and I think it's changing, testified to by our presence here, been so narrowly focused on our particular oppression that we forget we are powerful, and that we can draw power by finding ways to stand with others who are equally broken, oppressed, made invisible, dehumanized, or silenced. And we are in a place of privilege, as James says. All of us, just by being here today, no matter what our story might be, are already privileged. And out of that privilege can come a power that is, watch out, watch out. I'm a Buddhist teacher, and that is as confusing as it is clarifying, because it signifies organized religion, and it signifies patriarchy and so forth. But anyway, it's my job description, or my primary job description. And I transitioned on the job. I had no choice. But I found that I was able, by assuming that power, which is the power of being other. And as a white person of privilege, it was actually a big gift that I could now be other, and I could permit myself, out of something other than mere privilege, to say, well, I stand in solidarity with my brothers and sisters of color, with migrant workers, with people in the West Bank, or you name it. And I could begin to address topics that I may have felt somewhat uncomfortable with before. And I remember, I've told this story a lot because I like it, but I remember sitting in a room teaching for a weekend in New Mexico in a community of pretty progressive, but entirely straight, and mostly couples. 20 or 30 people, we were sitting in a circle for the weekend. They were all straight, and I said, you know what? Talking about my own transition, because the last time they'd seen me a year ago, I was more or less a guy, and now I was more or less not a guy. And talking about the power of transgression and the power of questioning. And those of you who've been to Manzanita know that after you pass the gate, the first sign you come to is a big blue and yellow question mark sitting there in the meadow in the middle of a post. On the way out, you get the exclamation mark on the backside, but a question mark. And it's not that there aren't any answers, but we can't find answers unless we have good questions. And there's a power in that questioning. And so I said to this bunch of straight people talking about transgression, talking about the process of becoming more aware, more responsible of our actions, our thought, you know what? I know you're heterosexual, but you're really a bunch of queer folks, aren't you? And they were so relieved. They were nodding their heads. Oh, someone's outed us, finally. And so, we can do the demographics, but what heterosexism implies is oppression, no matter what your sexual orientation, violence, no matter what regime, what administration, what side of the war you're standing on, oppression of the dispossessed, the further dispossessing of the dispossessed. And so for me, that questioning, obviously, as you hear, takes a much broader scope than just the ground I stand on for my own particular gender identity. It's not so important, and I'm so grateful for all of you here who've done such work to allow for our collective visibility to not just be tolerated, but to flourish, and for us to begin, I hope, to take that power, which is ours, and it's awesome power. Watch out. Watch out. Rock on.
Watch out. For real though. Anybody familiar with Audre Lorde? Yeah, I just got the master's tools in my head just now. I was like, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, the master's tools. I read it first in my favorite book in the whole wide world, This Bridge Called My Back, Radical Writings of Women of Color. Anyway, thank you for that. How many folks feel some level of oppression every day? How many folks have felt oppressed in their lifetime? Okay, so almost everybody raised their hand, and for those that didn't, for whatever reason, I imagine in this world, particularly living currently in the United States, there's some level of oppression that you may feel and start to get used to, perhaps. But I think when I see that sea of hands go up, and I think about something like being in solidarity with each other regardless of our issues, and how short-sighted it is to be single issue. I used to get worried, and then when I saw all those hands go up, I was like, cool. There's some place that we can start. And so even if I think like, oh, you're probably all like conservative and pro-war and about this, and so I can't talk to you, at least I know that there's something in your life and some place that I know that I can connect with you, and we can build together and build this broader movement. So when I think about the trans movement, I don't think about transgender rights, the end. I think about social justice and the liberation of all peoples all over the world. That's how I think about that. So yay us. Okay, get this. When we were in the planning committee, Alexis Rivera, who is our final panelist, was like, no, girl, save the best for last. And I was like, okay. But we were trying to do some age justice, young people don't always have to talk last and the least. So Alexis is about to tear it up. Alexis M. Rivera is currently working at the Transgender Law Center, shout out TLC, in San Francisco. So we didn't lose. LA did not lose Alexis. Alexis will be here forever because she's left her mark in that very, very special way. This is your place, girl. And for those of you who worked with Alexis while she was here, you know this. Prior to her work at TLC as a policy advocate, Alexis was the project coordinator for the Tranny Rockstar Project at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Alexis has also received several awards for her contributions to the transgender community. And and Alexis didn't list them out. You know what I'm saying? Like, she's like, I have been acknowledged, and I want you all to know that, but I'm not going to list them out because it's not about me. And I think for so many of us, even people who are the same exact age as you, Alexis, it has been about you in many ways. Okay. The other thing I want to say about Alexis that she didn't say is that she's also a member of Lotus, the League of Trans Unified Sisters, a founding, I don't know how they say it, but the first society. Alpha. So she is also that. She has been working with young people and dedicated, her young person's life to working with young people and not the empowerment of young people, but building youth power. So for me, that's different because as a young person doing this work, it's really different to be in there doing the work as opposed to an adult doing the work for us or creating space for us or teaching us, And so Alexis's model for me, ever since the first time I met you and you were like, you forgot intersex. I was like, thank you. So Alexis Rivera.
Well, let me start off by saying that I feel very blessed and honored to be able to give you information about my story. And I feel so blessed that I'm sitting here on the panel with Gwen's mom. Gwen holds a very, very special place in my heart. And I never get emotional, which is really weird right now.
Sorry.
Rico. So let me start off by saying that my passion for my community comes from the young people. I'm not sure if people attended, I think everybody attended the youth panel yesterday. And those kids up there were the most amazing, amazing kids. Not only were they bright, but the way how they were able to express their gender identity already at that age. And I started to go back and think, well, when was I 11? When I was 13? Yes, I was wearing my mom's shoes and, and heels and, making clothes and stuff. But would I be able to express that? No, I wasn't able to at that time. And so the intelligence, the brightness of these kids were just amazing. And then when that little boy, Angel, said about Buzz Lightyear, oh my God, I need to go get a Buzz Lightyear. And so that's a lot of where my passion comes from. Because when I transitioned, I must have been 16, 17, and there wasn't many services out there for youth like myself. And as I got older and as I started to, become more involved in my community, I saw that there definitely was a need for young people to be themselves and to have a space to be able to express their gender. In early transition, my main goal was to, and I hate this word, pass. Because sometimes trans people, that's the way how you get the title of being successful. That you're successful when you're able to walk down the street and not get called, a fag or a man in a dress, or look at that homeboy. And so that's what I focused on. I focused on the only way that I'm going to be successful is if nobody clocks me or reads me. And now, as I'm maturing into my womanhood, I'm realizing that that's not something that for me is successful. For me, successful is to be able to look in the mirror and be able to say, you know what, I'm a proud transgender woman. And I do not want to pass as anything other than a proud queer trans woman. I think looking at binary gender and looking at how transgender people see binary gender is very important. And I think that this is a very controversial topic because now we're having this new term called genderqueer. And what does genderqueer mean to our community? And I think that the more and more that we start exploring and genderqueer people are coming out, that binary gender is no longer going to exist. And I think that trans people who identify as a trans person is having a really hard time with connecting with the genderqueer community. And even though people might not want to hear that, but that's the matter of the fact, because all of a sudden you'll have a group of trans women and a genderqueer person will come and they'll be like, oh, here they come. Here they come. And I think, but that's the truth. And I'm only speaking the truth right now. And I think that we're really having to look at that. And I'm not saying that we should segregate the community, but looking at how trans people and the genderqueer community need to come together and start collaborating and working together and understanding why some people are comfortable with identifying genderqueer and why some people identify as trans, and looking at that and being able to explore that. I think also too we need to learn and talk about our culture. Being Latina, I was taught and brought up that, as soon as I transition, I have to get into a heterosexual relationship and I have to, warm the tortillas up for when my man, comes home, and I have to do the laundry and I have to clean the house after, an 8-hour day of the office. And yeah, that role fit for me very good in the early transition. I love being Latina Betty Crocker. But as I became more comfortable with my gender identity, realizing that's not what womanhood is about. If I want to cook for my man, it's because I want to, not because I have to. And I think that... And so that gives me to the topic of transfeminism and what transfeminism is. I think that young people need to explore more about feminism and what that movement would look like, and how as trans people or genderqueer people, we really need to look at that movement, because yes, I can, like I said, be that housewife and stuff, but that there's more into being what a woman is. I think it's important for us to tell our story, not somebody telling our story for us. I think that that's so important, and everybody's story should be heard, whether, you are a 20-year-old African-American trans woman on heroin or crystal meth, or if you are a Latina who's attending USC, or, or a Pacific Islander woman who's doing sex work. Whatever it is, each of our stories is important. And each and every one of our stories needs to be heard, because we all have our story. So when I tell my story, I'm telling my story from my experience. And I'm not here to represent any other person but myself. And on a last note, I think allies is so important, whether they're lovers, friends, whatever it be. But I think what Sylvia was saying earlier is that when she tells a story, people tend to gravitate, because they're like, wait a minute, why is this, Latina woman talking here about transgender civil rights? And so sometimes people have more of an open ear. So I embrace allies. I embrace the allies who want to. Don't take over our... How should I say it? Don't take it over, but just put it out there that you are a supporter, you are an ally, because I think it's very important that the stories come from who we are as people. And we need to unite. How can we expect for the larger society to accept us when we're still like, ooh, girl, did you see her? Oh, girl, da-da-da-da-da. And it's all this drama, in our community. We need to let that go behind and just embrace one another. And most importantly, we need to love one another. Thank you.
Latina Betty Crocker. Oh, any trans feminists in the space? You know? Thank you, Alexis. I had planned to follow up with some questions, but I totally am also feeling the room and the energy, and I feel like folks have a lot going on in your heads, and you want to talk about things that the panelists have brought up, things that you have brought up. Okay, here I go.
I know a lot of you here. Some of you I'm meeting for the first time. It's been a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I've learned, Alexis, thank you for bringing that up about the getting to know the other sub-communities. I'm as guilty as the next person. And it's been an eye-opener for me. Jameson, thank you for bringing up the point about everybody getting out and speaking. I've done a little bit, not as much as I would like. It's been one of the more enlightening and expanding experiences for me in my transition. But it's hard to find venues. And I know I'm not the only one who wants to go out and speak because I like to tell my story. It helped me to become the person I am now. And I know that there are people in this room who also would like to do that. So, for those of us who can't find the venues, I want to challenge Transgender Law Center and NCTE and all the other organizations to help people get out there. Pardon? Oh.
Okay.
So, I'm Deborah.
Deborah, are you willing to be like a point person in the community to also work on that? Yes.
I'd love to.
Okay.
I'd love to.
Okay. Here and then here.
Alexia say, well, my name is Claudia. Alexia say, she say something about love each other. In San Jose, we have a lot of organizations that in the past they don't have room for Hispanic, and I just want to know if it's any organization in San Jose that they don't have room for us, that they're open now to give us room for the Latino community. Because when I went to one organization, they said, "Oh no, this is only for white people," and I feel so bad. I just want, and I just want to know if that's going to change in San Jose. I don't know if it's, I don't want to say names, but or I don't want to say the name to organization, but I don't think that it's nice. I just want to know if that's going to change and they have room for Hispanic.
I recently just started at the Transgender Law Center, and I will let you know that being up north, I will make a commitment to open up more of the doors at the Law Center, me being Latina myself, and if that means that we have to go to the other organizations in the East Bay or in the city, I would be more than willing to advocate for you. So that's what I could do on my behalf.
Like, if you're genderqueer, you identify in a particular way, oh, you're really a woman, oh, you're really a man. And it's not who you are because it doesn't jive with your story. How many times do we face this issue of, oh, you're really a so-and-so? So when I fight back and I say, no, I'm not a man in a dress, I'm really a woman. I mean it. And I'm fighting something, and I'm being resistant, and I'm being radical, and I'm fighting a form of resistance. And I'm every bit as much a radical, every bit as much a resistant person as a person who opposes the binary. And I just want to say I think there's another dimension besides the bad binary, and it's those forces that take reality away from us. And I think that part of our goal is to fight back and claim reality for everyone so that everyone can have a voice. And so I just want to have a bigger picture where it's not just about the bad binary. It is about the bad binary, it is. But it's not just about the bad binary. It's also about those forces that take reality away from us. And I want to say that every trans person in this world who survives and tries to be who they are is a radical. And it's important to see the resistance in everyone. Thank you.
We have an opportunity to bust open what's been existing for hundreds of years, at least in the West, and that is an uptight social structure. I mean, get that? It's a social structure that is predicated upon, paternalistic, hierarchical control, blah, 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 blah. We have an opportunity to bust that open by speaking about who we are as individuals and as a diverse element in that society. To take our societies to the next level is going to be coming to grips and be comfortable with diversity. Right now, our societies are predicated upon trying to make everybody the same, even though they're different. And that's so immature. That's the teenage years. We got to go to the 20s and 30s for our society and bust it wide open. And we can do that. We had a panel yesterday about taking who we are outside of the movement into the mainstream society. That's where our power lies. I want you to get that. That's where the power lies. Once that hits society, it is all over. It's going down. It's going to change. Thanks.
My name is Xander. I'm on the board of FTM International, and I identify as a genderqueer trans man. So we cross ID, many. And because I come from a lot of privilege, I didn't struggle in my transness. So I came to it very smoothly, although I came to it very slowly. And the reason I came to it so slowly is because I encountered for about a decade what I'm encountering today. And I'm afraid to say this because I know, because my heart is pounding and I'm shaking inside, and I'm going to do it anyways. And that is that I went to countless events like this over the years before I decided to medically transition. And I saw panels like I see in front of me that have amazing stories and information to share. And like today, I didn't see very many that represented my experience. And so I want to point out that if I want to hear genderqueer, trans man, FTM, whatever voices, I have to go to FTM conferences. Because when I go to transgender conferences, I don't hear very many of the voices that reflect my experience. And I'm also privileged to know Jameson personally because we live in the Bay Area together and count him as my mentor. And I see him being pulled into these things all the time and being the one FTM voice. And it's a spectacular voice. I'm very appreciative. And I'd like to see more. I'd like to hear more, and I'd like to be able to experience more. And so I'd just like to make that request, that instead of FTMs having to always force ourselves to advocate for ourselves, that sometimes we can just mention it and it will just be in the consciousness of the organizers of these broader conferences. And I'm also a person who's willing to be one of those voices.
Yes. Right. Okay, so way to go, Xander. So whoever's taking I'm on the organizing committee. I would like to be on the organizing committee for next year list. Xander is volunteering. I'm a genderqueer trans man. Okay. Oh my God, I'm so invisible. Moderators too have identities.
I guess my question is there like a Memorial Day, at least in your town, for when, or like a celebration type of thing, or is there anything that we can do as a community to really remind ourselves constantly that, you know, that we should not let these things go in vain, that we should, you know, be constantly reminded that because of what happened to Gwen, good things are happening. So I was just wondering if you could just, I don't know, tell us a little more about that, or if there's anything going on.
Well, every day I celebrate Gwen. So there's not a day that goes by since she was taken from me that I don't celebrate, I don't think about her, I don't miss her, cry for her. But she definitely didn't die in vain. And there has been some amazing things that have happened since her death. And I share her with the world. There's still so many good things and positive things that are happening for the transgender community. And, Gwen can't take all the credit. I mean, it takes work, and you just have to keep up, even when you feel burnt out, take a break, whatever, but regroup and go back at it again, because it's not over. It's far from over. There is a memorial site that was set up by a transgender woman when Gwen was killed. It's the Jamie site. If you go on the internet, that's the main website that's set up, and it's got everything, all the newspaper articles, movies, books, whatever. I mean, everything's there. I haven't been on that site in a while. There's also a guest book and stuff, so you can keep up with it. Like I said, there's not a particular day that we celebrate. I mean, like, every day I celebrate her. I mean, there's not a day that goes by that she's forgotten, and believe me, she's still around, her spirit. And this kid is, I mean, that's a blessing to me. Sometimes I wish that she would, go home with the Lord and be in peace, but she just wants to stick around. I think there's still some work for her to do, and that's fine. There is also, through the Horizons Foundation, a fund that was set up for Gwen. It's the Gwen Araujo Transgender Education Fund. There hasn't been very many donations there, but that's also set up. So that's one thing I can think of right now. Chris, am I missing anything? Mr. Daly? Day of Remembrance. Oh, excuse me. Oh, sorry, Gwen. Yeah, that's not her day, though. I mean, but that's another day that...
It is.
That's not Gwen's day. Her head will get bigger and bigger. We don't want to go there. She's already the center of attention. We don't want to go there. No offense, Gwenny.
I think another thing that we can do is we're talking about young people, and young people are the future of our community. And so I think what Bambi is saying, like, how are we going to continue this movement? And I think that the way how we'll continue this movement is, and this is just going to be one example of how, is that when next year's conference happens, that we all pledge to bring a youth to this conference so that they could be around lawyers and doctors and psychologists and, and engage with people like who are on the panel and in the audience. And so we should all make that pledge before we leave today to bring in a youth next year, whether that be a financial thing, whether that, you drive them, from the Greyhound station to the conference, whatever that looks like, but that you pledge to bring somebody here so that they are able to tell their story as a young person, and the movement will continue.
Sylvia, the other thing that maybe you and Gwen don't know yet is that locally Q Team, a queer and trans youth of color multi-issue organization, every year does a leadership development training for queer and trans youth of color, and it's in Gwen's name, it's in her honor. It's an acronym now. I think it's like growing, wellness, empowerment, nurturing, and there are many ways that Q Team feels connected to Gwen, and so this is one way that, in making sure that other young people of color, other young trans people of color here in LA at least, have an opportunity that it didn't sound like Gwen had a safe space with other queer and trans youth of color to be who she was and grow and develop into the leader with other young people,
Right, thank you. I also forgot, oh my gosh. Oh, just wanted to say that I forgot there is also an official MySpace that's set up for Gwen. You do not believe, girl, how many friends she has. And for the most part, it's been positive, but there are still some wackos out there, and so there's times that we get some weird messages. Lately, we've been getting a lot of messages about Nicole Brown, and yeah, people have been even mean, I forgave her, and I forgave the defendants for murdering my daughter. I know I've had a lot of criticism for that too, but I believe in God, and I know where my daughter is, and I will not be a hypocrite. And it was something that I had to do for me personally. Not just the words to say I forgive, I mean, true forgiveness. I mean, I already visited one of the defendants, so that tells you who I am, and I didn't do it publicly or with the media. I mean, that was personal and private. Because I believe in my heart, I know a different story of how Gwen was killed. And I truly believe that 2 of the guys didn't plan this, and if they could take this day back, they would, and they're very remorseful, and they're sincere with their remorse. The other 2, I don't buy. I mean, I believe that they premeditated it. So, I mean, that just shows you who I am. I mean, it's not to score points or anything. But I also want to mention, Gwen's not the only transgender person that has been killed. And we need to remember everyone. And until there's no more murders from not just the transgender community, but the whole entire LGBT community, you know, we have to continue to doing what we're doing to until there's none. And it is important. I agree with a lot of people here in the audience that have talked about it's important to tell your stories because there are so many different stories. People often ask me, you know, why do you think your daughter's case got so much attention? And, you know, when there are other people that are being killed, you know, I don't have the answer to that really, other than, you know, I believe because it happened in the Bay Area, and what's still shocking to me, because of my unconditional love for my child. I mean, I thought all parents love their children, and, you know, it's sad. You know, I found out through my journey that that's not always the case, and I'm sorry for that, but, you know, it's not a perfect world, and I've learned that in the past 4 years. But that's why we need to work together to create change. And I believe that the movement's still happening. I don't think it has stopped, even though it's been 4 years since my daughter's death. I won't take up any more time because I can talk forever.
Hello and welcome to Action News 11. No, I'm joking. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Allison Laureano, and I am the president of Transgender San Francisco, not just your food mistress. So I know that Chris and Cecilia were giving me such a hard time about spending time behind the counter doing the food for the last few days, but I got to remind them that when you're behind the counter, you meet every single person in the conference. And so that's really what this conference is about. It's about building ties and building communities, all of our different organizations meeting together and connecting with each other and sharing our experiences. So, Claudia, I heard a question, what can we do to service organizations, Latinas in San Jose? Well, I'll give you my pledge as president of Transgender San Francisco that I will open and create a safe space for Latinas within the San Francisco Bay Area. And I challenge every organization in here to join with me and develop a coalition of creating space for everybody within our organizations. Thank you. Now, I've known several of these panelists up here. Jameson has de-virginized me when it comes to speaking. And we say this all the time. We kid each other all the time. But my very first speaking engagement was with Jameson, and so I echo Xander's comments about him being such a powerful voice for a very long time, and we really appreciate you. And obviously, Sylvia, we've known each other for about a couple of years now, and I've worked with you on a few things, and so thank you for being up there. So, Alexis, you talked about helping to create space, working in the Transgender Law Center. I make my commitment to you that we will open up our organization to work with you. So, anything and any other comments that you guys, the panel, have to help in facilitating this coalition building with us and give us some insights on what you think works best, I think that we as organizers and leaders of our community groups can benefit from what your knowledge is.
Do you want to respond? Okay, that's more in the planning later. Just a time check, Chris. 10 minutes. So I just want to be clear that we all the panelists have something prepared to like leave you with, to like tingle you and make you feel all inspired. We do. So we're going to take one more question and then close out.
Okay, my question is, what do we do? How do we keep the transgender movement, FDM, GenderQueer, MLF, on a national front? Because there's too many of us getting killed, and it's been covered up. There's no focus on the trans community. Heinous crimes of hatred have been committed against our community. the girl just got killed last weekend in San Francisco. I knew her, and we have gotten close. So how do we keep this on the national spotlight and bring it to the national level so any trans, male to female, female to male, death will not be swept underneath the rug, and that our movement will be going forward, and there will be national headlines and national attention on our community and what we're doing. That's for any panelist. Sylvia, love you. You're sweet. Keep on fighting. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to respond to that last. Thank you for that question. It is time. It is time for a national Congress of transgender, genderqueer, other gender groups across the country. And I challenge all the organizations in California to take that on and to create a national Congress from groups across the country. Transgender people are everywhere. Everywhere. And it's about time that we had a national spotlight on what we have to give, and a national spotlight on that we have a right to exist and to contribute. So I just challenge our organizations, the Transgender Law Center, the National Center for Transgender Equality, to sponsor a national Congress of representatives from every state, maybe perhaps the world, in the United States. How about that, a World Congress of Transgender, Genderqueer people? Wow.
There was an attempt to do this years ago. It was through the International Foundation for Gender Education. They sponsored what they called the Congress of Transgender Organizations, and they tried to get every transgender organization in the country to send a representative to the IFGE meetings each year, which happen in the spring, their main one that happens in the spring, which moves around the country. And so they try to make themselves available to people in different parts of the country who can't travel as much as other people can. And it never really took off. And I that doesn't mean that it can't happen. I'm not trying to say it can't happen, but what I'm trying to make people aware of is that there really is a long history of people trying to organize this community. And we're in a huge, huge country with a lot of issues on the table. And we have been so dramatically marginalized, which is one of the reasons why so many of the heinous crimes against trans people are not even reported in the newspaper. It's going to be really difficult to pull all this together. And I think we need to recognize that and not allow ourselves to get burned out because it doesn't happen this year or next year or the year after. This is a lifelong effort, and we have made incredible progress, thank you, in the last 10 years. Amazing progress. People in the gay and lesbian community go, wait a minute, it took us 30 years to get all these ordinances and things. How come you get to do this so quickly? Well, we have, profited in a sense by the efforts of the gay and lesbian community, but we've learned from their model that their model doesn't always work. And we are expanding on that model, and we are broadening the issues, and we are moving things forward in a faster way because we are broadening the issues, because we are learning to connect with people in various ways. And I just want to say that it's a long, slow process, and that we need to really hold our courage in this, because it's not going to happen overnight. Go out and make relationships with reporters. Go out and volunteer to work in your city hall. Work for your supervisors or city council people, however your structure is where you live. Go out and get engaged with organizations that share your values that are separate from trans, so that we move trans experience into other people's frame of reference, because it's all about their frame of reference. Can they see us? Because they don't want to. You had asked, how can we get opportunities to speak? One of the things that I find so frequently is that people don't want to know about us. They just don't want to be bothered. We are so unimportant. And the trick is, as you were saying, we have so much to offer about their own experience that they haven't even gotten because they haven't had to face the challenges that we have faced. If we can just get them to understand where they fit in our world, let alone where we fit in their world, we can build those bridges that will awaken their consciousness and that will stop these kinds of heinous crimes being unnoticed. I mean, I can't say we're going to stop the crimes overnight either. Because, people get murdered who aren't trans too. I mean, it's just, we've got a horrific society in many respects, a very violent society, and we have to combat that on many levels. I am really hopeful that we can, because of the energy that has been created, that we can sustain that energy in this community because of the connections that we make at events like this. And I think we need to look for other kinds of events. There are many, many trans events going on around the country all the time. And I think sometimes we stay very close to in our own little space, in our own, where we feel safe, and we don't look beyond that. And so I challenge all of us to keep taking the message out, because every one of us can do it.
I think also too is that we all need to vote. Somebody said, how do we change this? Right. You need to learn, and you need to learn about what's happening in legislation. You really need to go. Being at the law center, I didn't know that all of these policies and legislation was out there. And so when you're uneducated, you don't know what your rights are. And so as a community, as a person, as a Latina, I need to get my monolingual Spanish sister and take her and educate her about her rights in this country. And so I think the more and more that happens, the more and more, hopefully, or the goal is that murders like Gwen will no longer happen. Vote.
Have you ever given a cotton thread to a child to break, and then when they can break it easily, take 5 or 10 threads and weave them together, and it's a lesson. They can't break it. In unity, there's solidarity, not necessarily monolithic unity, but I think again to say how we can so get caught in the particularities of our identity, and there's a pattern of oppression, how we then move into further isolating. And we've all experienced that, no matter who we are, trans or not, how in isolation we perpetuate that sense of distancing. I have had for many years a quotation on my wall from that wonderful writer, revolutionary, if you will, Bell Hooks. Who says, you may know this, she says that self-actualization has no meaning for oppressed people. What has meaning is the formation of communities of resistance. And I just understood that in a different way this morning, how what we can mean by self-actualization isn't just a spiritual self-actualization or a psychological, personal self-actualization, but it's just the idea of getting by. I can get by, I pass, I'm somewhat acclimatized to my new, though marginalized or somewhat marginalized role as a trans person, and what will I do? I'll mainstream in the normative society, which is all about isolation, because lies are told, or not even told, but are held to keep us under, to keep us silent. And so we must think of what it means to form communities of resistance. Not communities of resistance just for our own rights defined by a personal identity, but beyond that, as has been said by people here and in the audience, to broaden our scope, to look at a place in participation, to be seen we do have power. We have extraordinary power. What I learned early on is when I walked into a room full of straight, heterosexist people who are uncomfortable with 6'2", obviously tranny blonde women, it was my job to make them comfortable. I had huge power because once I made them feel I wasn't going to be awkward, I wasn't going to eat them, they were so grateful that I could tell them anything about who I was, about who I wasn't, and about others not there who might not be so privileged as I. And we can mark who isn't here too. We represent a tiny proportion of privileged trans people who've self-actualized somehow. How do we formulate the community of resistance that doesn't exclude? And I think when that question is not only answered but continually asked, then some of the issue of how do we create a national movement that does something to put an end to the systemic violence that we face, that all marginalized people face, we can take some steps. So put the threads together. It's strong.
I just think, I'm just going to make it short and sweet, I think we should do our work with love and do it from our hearts. I don't label anyone. I don't care if you're FTM or I don't care, whatever you identify. To me, it doesn't matter. I look at you as human beings, and I don't label anyone. So that's what I try to do when I go out and speak to the kids, is to just bring it back to a humanity issue, that we're all human beings and we're all equals and we should be equals and treat each other with love and respect, and I believe we'll make this world a much better place.
Just a couple of closing words. First of all, Chris, are you here? Chris Daly? He stepped out. He stepped out. Well, the people that are on the board, how about expanding invitations to our allies, and let's create allies to come and join us next year. Let's have people from the feminist movement. Let's have people from labor. Let's have people from the farm workers. Let's have people from whatever. Have them be here. That's how we're going to expand our power. And I really appreciate and respect the long-term fight, the fighters, the people who have been in this movement for a long time and that created the path for us. And at the same time, I just want to be a voice for a vision. Let's opt in who we need to opt in to realize and step into our power. And let's go ahead and go for it. It may take 5 years to have a national Congress, but let's go for it. Let's not drop that vision. Our country, our society needs this. It's not just for us. It needs this. Thank you.
But I read one in a place where it said, when the oppressor is no longer being oppressed, they become the oppressor. And so I think that sometimes our community, who we consider successful, get to a point where they no longer feel oppressed, but they feel like there's a need to oppress other people. And so I think as community members, we need to drop that and embrace somebody who you feel is being oppressed, because you've been there and you've experienced that. And so with that said, I believe in love, happiness, and queerness. So I hope you enjoyed the weekend. I had a fabulous time, and thank you for giving me your undivided attention.
I have a vision of a world in which every single one of us, every single person, every single man, woman, child, boy, girl, intersex person, genderqueer person, gay, straight, bisexual, asexual, every single person is free to be exactly who they are. Exactly who they are at any moment. That's what I want to see. That's why I keep speaking. That's what I keep trying to encourage other people to help create. thank you all for coming to this weekend.